We are back for another weekly edition of the CBB Central podcast. Myself, Brad Cavallero, breaking down the college basketball action of the week, breaking down some games that we saw, some games that are coming up. It's my final podcast recording from Evanston until the new year. We headed home next Thursday, so some games in the Northeast will certainly be being hit up. Not that I don't love my Chicago teams, but it'll be good to see some other teams in live action. Brad, my weekend slightly better than yours from a fan's perspective, as we always kind of touch on before we get started. Siena beat Robert Morris on a last-second shot by Kevin Degnan. Northwestern went on a 25-0 run to beat DePaul after they were getting killed in the second half. Providence, on the other hand, what happened, man?
I'm not really sure. I mean, it was just 20-point lead at the half, and all of a sudden it's just UMass was scoring. We weren't, and then before you know it, blink of an eye, and it's a one-possession game. I have a sixth sense of when we're gonna blow an enormous lead. It was like one or two possessions after the half, and like Khalif Young picked up like his third foul, and Cooley left him in, and I was like, he's gonna pick up his fourth, and then Watson's gonna have to play the whole second half. He's gonna be winded. I feel a UMass run coming, similar to when they blew the NCAA tournament game to USC a few years ago. And they're up like 20 at the half again. The minute that the second half started, I just knew. So I have a sixth sense for blowing leads.
Yeah, there is something about it where you can kind of you can feel, even though you're up big, that it's not quite safe. That was the best game to describe that for me was the Northwestern Michigan State game last year, when Northwestern went up by like 27 in the first half. And you still felt like there was no way they won that game. Like, you still did not believe that Northwestern was going to win that game. For some reason, Michigan State was going to come back, and of course they did. I watched a good amount of that Providence game, though. I mean, I was pretty impressed by UMass. I think they have a second level they get to when Pipkins is playing well, Pierre's hitting shots, and I mean they're getting deeper. Samba Diallo was impressive in that ball game. Rashawn Holloway made some big plays. They got something from Curtis Cobb and Keon Clergeot. And this team showed in that second half why they could be an upper echelon team in the A10, but they've shown in losses to Howard and to Holy Cross at home that they are not an upper echelon team in the A10 yet, and we'll see if they can change that. The league pretty wide open. VCU looked good today against Virginia. Dayton looked good against Auburn the other night as well, but really tough loss for the Friars, and puts them in a pretty tough spot for the NCAA tournament picture.
They have the worst resume in the Big East by far. Out of the whole conference, there's four bad losses, right? There's Georgetown's loss to Loyola Marymount on neutral. There's Villanova's loss to Furman at home.
You mean ranked Furman?
Yes, the ranked Furman. That's a terrible loss. And then the two Providence losses, Wichita State on a neutral, and now UMass at home. Maybe you could throw in San Diego State on a neutral for Xavier, because they are falling fast. But I mean, Providence has the worst resume right now, and it seems like we have half the fan base saying, "Who cares?" Last year we lost to X, Y, and Z, but last year we had 3 wins against top 5 teams. That's not happening this year. There are no top 5 teams for us to beat. So this is super concerning, and it angers me a lot of the reaction I've seen. But will this be another stressful January, February, March? That's all. I just want 1 year where we don't lose to the DePaul, Brown, Boston College, UMass, quartet. Just 1 year. That's all I want.
Yeah, it's tough because like I had the similar feel while Northwestern was getting beat by DePaul, where I was like, Northwestern's not like Northwestern will have plenty of opportunities, but you feel pretty bad if Northwestern isn't going to beat DePaul about their chances of dancing. Like, it's such it's not a huge game by any means, but like in terms of like quadrant 1 win, or like it's not like even going to be a super bad loss. DePaul will probably be a top 100 team, but it's just like you have to win that game at home if you want to go dancing. Like, you just have to. Now, the UMass loss will probably look worse on paper by the time the season's over, but it was weird. Like, the game meant like nothing, but also everything at the same time. So I was certainly glad that they pulled that one out. It's weird. I mean, there are definitely games that you just feel are sneaky NCAA tournament, like huge games this time of year. I thought VCU today could have had a huge opportunity. The St. Louis Oregon State game today, like, huge. If St. Louis wants any chance of an at-large, massive game. No one cared,
Yeah. The thing with the A10 though is I think that they're in a pretty decent spot to accomplish the goal of multiple bids. They're in a terrible spot to accomplish the goal of good conference, like achieving the moniker of this is a good conference. They're in a horrible spot because the bottom has bottomed out. It totally let you down. But in terms of getting multiple bids, Dayton, St. Louis, VCU, they haven't, they're in a spot where maybe it's a slim chance that they all go, 15-3, but it could be just like last year where URI, Bonnie's, and Davidson were the clear top three. They didn't take they were able to avoid enough minefields to remain intact and then go dancing. And maybe we could see like Dayton and St. Louis or VCU and St. Louis, two of those three getting bids.
Yeah, I'm not super optimistic there, just partially because I don't think like VCU, Dayton, and St. Louis are better than the other bubble teams, just on paper. Like, if you were to like just drop the ball and see what happens, like a Northwestern, an Alabama, some Big East bubble team, like Xavier, I guess, would be one at this point. Like, I think you drop the ball with teams like that on the floor, I would be very surprised if all three of those high majors didn't win 7 to 8 times out of 10 against those clubs. Now, I think that will become clear during A10 play when those teams go closer to the 13-5 than the 15-3. But yeah, I mean, they'll have a chance if they can do that, as you said. I would love to see the league get multiple bids. Like, look, I love the A10. I've said for a while that I think they're probably getting one bid this year, but I love the A10. I think it's a great league.
Yeah, and in terms about their kind of matchups with comparable teams, I mean, the top of the A10 has already taken a bite out of the middle of the Big East. Where St. Louis has wins over Butler and Seton Hall. The Seton Hall one come away from home. Dayton has the neutral win over Butler. So the top can certainly beat the bubble teams in the Big East, which I think puts them in a nice spot. And in terms of how they would compare to other bubble teams, at this point it doesn't really matter because all they have to do is avoid taking too damaging of losses, right? If they can keep the losses to like a road game here against a middle team and like a home game against another top team in the conference, I think that they'll be in a pretty good spot. In terms of just the tournament picture overall, every conference right now is down except for the Big Ten.
Yeah, Big Ten looks great.
Big Ten could legitimately get 11 bids, like everybody besides Illinois, Rutgers, and Penn State. Maybe Northwestern misses too.
Put them in.
So that's right. So the Big Ten is up, but the Big East, I mean, is down. I think that 6 bids is still a possibility. With Providence, Georgetown, DePaul, and Xavier looking on the outside looking in right now. But in terms of where those teams are seated, it's going to be lower, right? The ACC, the top looks great. The middle is not living up to expectation, like your Clemson, Syracuse. NC State hasn't played anybody yet. Notre Dame and in Miami have fallen flat. Louisville's better than expected, but so that's in that middle 6. Only one of the teams is better than expected. I don't think any team in the SEC has been better than expected, except for like Arkansas, maybe. I guess you can make an argument for Auburn and Tennessee are a little better than people thought. The Big 12 only like Texas Tech and in Oklahoma, and I'm not even sure Oklahoma is an NCAA tournament team at this point. So I mean, every conference, the Pac-12 is down. I mean, so the bids have to come from somewhere.
It's a very good point. I think that probably should bring us to our main topic of today's podcast. And there's been a ton of action this week, a ton of huge ranked games, whether it was Michigan getting pushed by Northwestern on Tuesday night, whether it was Gonzaga losing today as the number 1 team in the country to Tennessee, everything in between. We wanted to just kind of run through creating a top 25 and how we feel about some of these teams, talk about some of the games we saw this week as a result, kind of through that lens. So I think the biggest debate, Brad, is who should be number 1, because Gonzaga loses today, certainly acquitted themselves fine in doing so. It was an excellent ball game. Tennessee's an excellent ball club. Admiral Schofield with a big shot late to put it away. I personally did not watch as much as I would have liked to, mostly because I have a paper to write and I'm taking a break from this podcast taking a break from writing to record this podcast. But Brad, I mean, what did you see in that game? did you come away with any major takeaways from either team? Because to me, from what I watched, I really came away being like, these are two excellent ball clubs in the top 6 to 7 nationally, just as I thought before.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, yeah, nothing too kind of distinct, in terms of like team impressions. Like, after watching that game, I'm not like more convinced Tennessee's a championship level team than I was prior to the game. I think they're two teams in the top tier. I think the top tier consists of 8 teams, which we'll get to. But I mean, it was a well played game. They're both very good teams. No Killian Tilly and Crandall for Gonzaga, and I don't think Lamonte Turner played for Tennessee. I don't recall seeing him out there.
He's on the box score.
So both teams were a little shorthanded. In terms of kind of style things that I like, I really like Tennessee, how they played big a lot, right? Where they started Yves Pons at the 2. So they had Pons, Schofield, and Williams. They were crashing the offensive glass. They did a great job getting second and third chance opportunities, especially Fulkerson off the bench. He was very active. He's not a great player, but he's certainly very active on both sides of the glass. So that was something that I really like to see, where Tennessee's not the most explosive offensive team. They don't have a ton of high-powered weapons, but they have 2 stars in Williams and Schofield, and they really hit the offensive glass. They really play super hard, and they have an underrated point guard in Jordan Bone. So I mean, this is as legitimate of a championship or Final Four pick as there is.
Yeah, I mean, I think Grant Williams' ability to pass the ball, and Schofield's to a lesser extent, really helps them go big at times, because when Grant Williams had 7 assists in this game, he's a great passer out of the post. He can take it at the top of the key and distribute and go off the bounce. I mean, he is so versatile, and that type of versatility from, I guess, your 4-man in most lineups is just so valuable. He was awesome in this ball game, and obviously Schofield will get a lot of the headlines with the 30 points, the game winner. But I didn't take away anything really negative from Gonzaga. I mean, Josh Perkins didn't score. That's not ideal. They're going to need him a little bit more, but continue to pass the ball well. This team isn't super deep without Crandall and Tilly. Once those guys get back, they'll be fine. I think this game meant a little bit more for Gonzaga, just because for seeding purposes, they're not going to have the opportunities in the WCC. I think they're probably still in decent shape to get a 1 seed if they can maybe only have one more loss remaining. If they beat North Carolina coming up, that'd be pretty big. But yeah, I didn't come away with anything too negative from Gonzaga, other than maybe a missed opportunity for a big resume win that will kind of cap the resume, although they already have the Duke win, so that's pretty good.
Yeah, they have Duke on a neutral. They have at Creighton, right? And then they have Washington, which I think Washington's a team kind of like USC last year, where I don't think that their resume is going to match their talent level, and they could be on the outside looking in, despite being more than worthy of a bid, just because of where the Pac-12 is headed. But I mean, that should be 3 nice wins there, and then with the road games in the WCC, getting wins against the middle of that conference is going to be worth more this year because of how they performed in the non-conference. So I think Gonzaga is in a great spot for a number 1 seed, and I mean at worst, I think they're a 2 seed. So I mean that's a great spot to be in, especially with the injuries that they've kind of had to survive.
Yeah, and I also don't think it's as quite a big a deal as people make it out to be. That like, oh, if you're a 1 seed, like Gonzaga's not losing to a 15 seed. Where like if they wind up on the 2 or the 3 line, I don't think it's like so crushing that like people act like it's a lot of bigger deal than it is. I think they'll be fine. But yeah, I mean, nothing too huge on Gonzaga, which really opens the door for Kansas to be ranked number 1. I think most people expect them to be number 1 come tomorrow morning. Personally, I haven't really seen it. I mean, I watched a good amount of the New Mexico State game. I did not see them against Stanford. I watched some of the Tennessee game a while back. That was a close one. They played a lot of close ball games. Vermont pushed them. Even Louisiana Lafayette pushed them. Those are good majors, but they've been pushed by pretty much every team that's played them. They don't pass the eye test yet. Now, Hazelmetrics has them around 15 in his rankings. That's not quite as low as I'd have them. I think I'd probably still have them in the top 10, maybe even the top 5. But if they didn't come in with a top 3 preseason hype, would they be number 1 right now? I don't think so, which is why I'm tempted to say Duke's the best team in the country, to answer our original question.
Yeah, so I'm going to have Duke at number 1. in my top 25. Besides, I mean, their only loss is a super tight loss in Maui to Gonzaga, who's another top tier team. And while Kansas doesn't have any losses, I mean, you mentioned they were tested against a Stanford team who's just not very good. I'm not sure if Stanford's going to finish inside the top 100. New Mexico State is good, but I mean they're top 75. I mean at best. I mean they're probably not an at-large team. Maybe if they beat Kansas yesterday, they would be, but not. Certainly not right now. I mean, Marquette tested them. You mentioned that they're not really performing up to expectation. I mean, they have so many new pieces, and now with Azubuike out, I think they're in real danger of taking a loss here. Whether it be to Villanova, who hasn't been super impressive, but they beat a very good Florida State team on neutral court. I mean, DJ Gloss is a great player. It looks like Kansas has found something with Davon Dodson being their point guard of the future, but I mean Grimes has disappointed. I think KJ Lawson is disappointed. Charlie Moore, yeah. I mean, so I mean Vic was super hot. He only had 5 points yesterday, so I think that there's some legitimate concern that Kansas could fall a little bit. I still don't see them losing the Big 12, right? I mean, they're still, in my opinion, two tiers ahead of the next team in that conference, and that's a conference where the middle has fallen significantly. So I think Kansas is in decent shape. I would not be surprised if they're ranked number 1, but I think Duke should absolutely be ranked number 1.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with those sentiments. I mean, Udoka has been really important for them. That team looked a little lost on offense at times without him. I was honestly surprised we didn't see more of Dedrick Lawson at the 5 in the New Mexico State game. They even played Lightfoot for a while. To me, I would just go Lawson at the 5 and spread you out. Play more guards who can break you off the bounce, even if it's guys like Charlie Moore who've struggled. But this team isn't as deep as we thought. I mean, Quentin Grimes barely played in the second half. He was not very good. He was pushing off. He could call for a push off when he was trying to drive. Like Quentin Grimes should be able to drive past the New Mexico State defender. Like, I'm sorry, he has to be able to do that. Without LeGerald Vick just going nuts from downtown, and we don't seriously think LeGerald Vick is going to be a 56% 3-point shooter this season. Like, they could be in some real trouble. I mean, the Big 12 doesn't have a team who I'd say that can beat them for a season. I don't think Texas Tech is there. I don't think Iowa State's there. I don't think Oklahoma's there. West Virginia's been down. TCU could push maybe a little bit if Jalen Fisher's healthy. They had the big one over USC this past weekend. But yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I'm concerned a little bit that this is more of like a 5 to 10 team nationally, which once again, like boo-hoo, don't we all wish our team could be disappointing and be like the 7th best team in the college basketball? But that's where I kind of see them right now. I almost would put them behind. If you were just telling me who are the 7 best teams in college basketball, I think I would have them behind Gonzaga, Duke, Virginia, Michigan, Nevada, and Tennessee.
But not Auburn? You still have them over Auburn?
That'd be close. That would be the debatable point for me. If you were to said line them up, best teams in basketball, college basketball right now, I think it would be very close between Kansas and Auburn.
Yeah, because I think those 8 teams that we just rattled off right there, I think that's the clear top tier. Now, I mean, Duke might be in its own tier technically over these teams, but Gonzaga beat them. Tennessee beat Gonzaga. I think it's very safe to say that these 8 are the clear top tier. In terms of ordering them, I'm going with Kansas at 3. While I agree with you that I would like to put them more 7 and 8, I'm kind of struggling with my top 25 philosophy. Where on one hand, my like if you were to ask me what my philosophy is, I would say each week I'm trying to predict how the top 25 is going to look on March 17th or whatever the day of Selection Sunday. I'm trying to predict the standings, and then each week we have more and more data to kind of form our opinion, and then on that last week it should be 95% of the results of the season. But in terms of where I have to slot Kansas, I mean they beat Tennessee on neutral court, right? So and then Tennessee beats Gonzaga. Gonzaga beats Duke, so we're in this kind of cluster here. I think 3 is like the most logical spot for me behind Duke and then Virginia. Who has been tested against an inferior VCU team, but I'm I'm kind of struggling with my placement. I don't see 3 as like I'm not super confident in it, but that I think that's where I have to go here.
Yeah, I think I'd probably leave them at 2 or 3, just in terms of where I'm gonna like in my Rockin' 25 next week, where I'll have them. I don't think it's fair to move them down 5 spots for getting pushed by a good New Mexico State team, but it's more kind of the overall accumulation of what we've seen so far. I just think like if you said who are the best 8, and I like right now, like play a tournament, I think I would probably put Kansas as the worst team, even though their seed wouldn't be the lowest. The Tennessee wins get really, really good. And Tennessee should have won that game, you would argue, correct? I mean, Grant Williams fouled out. They had that game won, and that's going to sting. Tennessee would be number 1 right now if they won that game. That's pretty wild to think about. I think if you told me to rank them right now in terms of what they should be for a poll, I think I would do Duke 1, Gonzaga 2, Kansas 3, Tennessee at 4, Michigan 5, Virginia 6, Nevada 7, and Auburn 8. That's so tough. I mean, those tiers are so tight. I'm moving Michigan down, even though they've looked great and are undefeated. Like their biggest test of the year was winning on the road against a quadrant 1 road win was their toughest closest performance, and they still won that game and probably should have won it by more than they did. I mean, they were clearly better than Northwestern. Northwestern just made plays and forced Xavier Simpson to chuck threes, and Xavier Simpson got dared into doing it and kind of imploded. But they're so good, and yet I keep moving them down because other teams are doing more stuff.
Yep. So then, in terms of kind of the most recent games regarding this top tier, you just touched on the Michigan Northwestern game from last Tuesday. Kind of the big game, the very hyped game. Also regarding the top tier was Nevada and Arizona State on neutral floor. It was a very good game. I thought Nevada was on the ropes. I watched it on Saturday morning. I didn't stay up for it. But I mean, I was very impressed by both teams. I actually moved Arizona State up a few spots in my rankings, and I have Nevada here at number 8. I think that they're clearly in this top tier. Caleb Martin was not great, but when Nevada started to really attack off the dribble, it just seemed like there was a point in that second half where they were just getting to the rim. I don't really know how, but it was like Cody Martin, Caleb Martin, Caroline. They were just getting to the basket, and that's where this team's going to be at their best with all their positional size. I mean, Arizona State can match Nevada's positional size, starting a Kamani Lawrence at the 2, who's like 6'7", having Dort, who's a sturdy 6'4", playing the 1 and 2. Tayshaun Cherry is a very big wing. So, and then Cheatham too. So this was a good test for Nevada. They certainly passed it. And it seems like this team's going to be at its best when it's in attack mode and not settling for jump shots.
Yeah, they kind of sleepwalked through the first half. I watched it live. My eyes were kind of half closed at times. I was pretty tired. I was watching on my phone while lying in my bed. Couldn't really fall asleep while I was on, but really couldn't stay awake either. So I didn't get the super in-depth analysis I might like. I mean, they just felt in control from the time the second half started. They were down 12, but after the first 3 minutes, I was like, Nevada's winning this game. No way they don't. They were just in control. The Martins were playing really well in the second half. I mean, Caleb struggled a little bit in the first, but then in the second half he was a lot better. Both guys got to the rim really well. Caroline made big plays. The depth, once again, Musk played 6 guys pretty much. He gave Jordan Brown a couple minutes. He gave Corey Henson a couple minutes. For the most part, he played 6, and that's what he's going to keep doing in close games. He got pushed again today by Grand Canyon, who I think is pretty solid. But, yeah, I mean, they were just so impressive. I mean, Lou Dort made play after play to keep him in it. Cheatham is really good, much better than I really anticipated him being. I saw him as kind of a glue guy type at San Diego State, but they're really using him in a much better way, much more efficient way. I thought Tayshaun Cherry was pretty impactful early and then got hurt. Don't remember if he actually returned to that game or if he
did.
But he was ineffective afterwards. He did not look the same. But I had moved him up to I think 14 in my poll going into the week. They were up definitely in my top 15. I didn't really see anything that made me think Arizona State wasn't that level of a team. So I might move them down a spot or two just for losing. But I mean, I like this group. I think they're good.
Yeah, so I had them, I think 21 before. I've moved them to 17, which for me is the end of the second tier. I have 9 to 17 being my second tier. And yeah, in terms of Zylan Cheatham, I really liked his game at San Diego State, but I didn't know he was this skilled. I mean, he had a triple double the other day. He's more than just a kind of energy rebounding type. He's a legitimate offensive threat and someone who fits really well at that power forward spot next to a Romello White for Arizona State. And then in terms of where I have the second tier, I think that there's a clear team at the top of the second tier. That would be Michigan State for me. They survived against Florida, and then they blew out Iowa this week. I think that there's a clear gap between Nevada at 8 and Michigan State at 9. Michigan State, doesn't inspire a ton of confidence with how they play. Like they don't seem like an elite team yet. I think that they're clearly number 9, and they almost blew that Florida game late, but they survived in advance, and now they have some pretty good wins under their belt thus far.
Yeah, Michigan State's been quietly good. I mean, I think a lot of people wrote them off when they watched the first half against Kansas in the Champions Classic day 1 of the season. And people were just like, yeah, they're not good. Kansas is great. Let's move on. Michigan State's been solid. I don't think they're an elite team. I would agree. But yeah, I think they're a fringe top 10 team for sure. I didn't watch a ton of either of those games. I was at the Northwestern game during the Michigan State game. I was not watching basketball the night they played Iowa because that game was a blowout. It was not very exciting. But, I mean, they can really score the ball. They're going to have to be consistent on defense. I think Ford's been terrific on offense. They're really finding him, doing a really good job getting him the ball in the post. They're really good. They're solid. I think they're pretty in that pretty clear second tier, the best team of that group.
And then in terms of I think there's 3 other teams that kind of rise to the top of that tier. That would be for me, UNC, a team whose talent level hasn't really matched their play thus far. And then Wisconsin, who I've really liked thus far. I really like the makeup of their roster, how they have these kind of shooting and like long range threats surrounding Ethan Happ, and they're a very good defensive team. And then Florida State, who was tested by UConn, but I just love their team makeup as well. I really like Kabengele as their primary center there, and then Phil Cofer's coming back, and then Terrence Mann, really played well against UConn. He's really emerging as a senior, as one of the best players in all of college basketball.
Yeah, once Cofer gets back, Florida State's gonna be fine. I watched a good amount of the ending of that Wisconsin game, and it's weird. I never watched Wisconsin. I'm like, damn, these guys are really good. But they are just a team that's gonna find a way to win more often than not. They're much better defensively than I thought they'd be. I thought Wisconsin teams as a whole are always solid on that end of the floor, but I think they're so disciplined on that on defense, and Dimitri Trice has been so awesome. I guess I question, like, Ethan Happ is obviously an elite player in college basketball, but I mean, can your entire team be run through a player who just dribbles into post ups and then creates plays from there? Like, I think there's eventually going to be there are teams that could really challenge them. Like, I think Florida State, for instance, would be an absurdly tough matchup because they get the hands in all the passing lanes. Their length would bother Happ. Happ can't really shoot the ball still. Like, in terms of like a team that can push for a Final Four, I don't really see it. But at the same time, you feel good about them whenever you watch them play. I mean, obviously a huge win for Marquette, but I didn't come away disliking Wisconsin. They still think their margin of error is pretty thin, which is what happened on that. What showed in that game when guys don't play. Brad Davison didn't play very well in that game. Also punched a dude in the nuts, which was also an interesting play, and I kind of loved it because I was like, now we have a reason to hate Brad Davison if we didn't already. But like, yeah, I mean, their margin of error is thin. When one of their 3 doesn't play well, they're in trouble. And Brad Davison didn't play very well; they were in trouble. They lost to a pretty good Marquette team on the road.
Yeah, so I think in terms of Wisconsin, they don't look like a Final Four team because of how strong that top 8 in the first tier is. Well, I think that that's the clear top tier there. And I think every other team, when compared to that, is going to look like they're not capable of competing with those teams, at least on paper. And then I think in terms of having Wisconsin at number 11 for me, where you may look at them and say, this is not the number 11 team in the country. They might not even be anywhere close to the number 11 team in 2017 or 2016. But it's important to remember that rankings are relative, and the only thing you need to be the 11th best team in the country, like you can be, like in theory, you can be a bad team and still be the 11th best team in the country. Now, I think Wisconsin is very good. I don't think that they're as good as that top tier. I think in maybe another year where there's a little more parity throughout the top 25, maybe they're more appropriately ranked in the 20s. But in terms of this year, I think that they're clearly knocking on the door of that back half of the top 10 or the back two spots of the top 10.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. Who else do you kind of see in this second tier? Does a team like Villanova spread in? Does an upstart like Texas Tech? Where do you see this tier ending? And because I mean, to me, I see Arizona State and NC State as two teams that I think have the talent to be in those tiers, have looked like they should be there eventually, but haven't really done enough to prove it. I mean, Arizona State's resume right now is they beat Utah State and they pushed they beat Mississippi State, they beat Utah State, and they pushed Nevada. Like, to me, that's not enough to say for sure that's a top 15 team, but I like them when I watch it.
Yeah, so for me, I mean, we mentioned the top half of tier 2 being Michigan State, UNC, Wisconsin, and Florida State, and we're pretty much in agreement with that. You said?
Yes, indeed.
So then I think there's a clear middle two for me, and that's NC State and Virginia Tech. And now played anybody, right? They played Wisconsin and lost on the road. So that's certainly not a bad loss. It was a close game, but they've played cupcakes aside from that, and they've have really yet to be tested. So I have no confidence in having them at 13. I had them at 15 in the preseason. They have a very at Penn State, I think this weekend, and Mike Watkins is back. So that's going to be a great litmus test to see if they really belong in the second tier. Then Virginia Tech, Chris Clark and Landers Nully have been out, essentially both suspended. Nully's thing is about like a potentially a potentially suspicious test score, like regarding like his SAT or something. But those are two guys. Clark was supposed to be a starter in a double-figure score. Nully was supposed to be a rotation guy. They've beaten Purdue on neutral, right? But besides that, there isn't too much there. So they're a team that also needs to show some more substance. But right now, that's good enough for the second tier.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, that's the problem, right? I mean, like how like their win of Purdue doesn't look very good right now, and Purdue's lost 3 in a row. Just lost at Texas, and it's like that loss in and of itself is not like a huge criticism for Purdue, but the fact that they're not winning any of those games other than beating Maryland at home, which okay, you probably should do that, is not like it doesn't really tell me anything about this team. So Purdue's a team I'm watching, but yeah, I mean it's always tough. You tweeted this at me like Marshall. I said Duquesne gets a really nice win over Marshall, and you're like, Marshall's giving everyone a good win. That's not going to be a good win very long. There's been a lot of wins early in the season where I think we say, oh, that's a good win, but it may not be a good win for long.
And in terms of Purdue, there's a tipping point where, all right, that's a quality loss, but at some point, too many quality losses, the scale just flies in the other direction where, okay, like this quality loss is fine, this quality loss is fine. You get to a point where there's too many quality losses and you just take a tumble, both in terms of perception with your record and then in terms of you've had so many opportunities and then you can't capitalize. And then in terms of rounding out the second tier, that I have 3 teams at the bottom of my second tier, which I have very little confidence in. You mentioned Arizona State, whose resume is a little thin right now. And the other 2 teams in that bottom portion of my second tier being Texas Tech and Villanova. I think Texas Tech, maybe when they get Kayvon Moore fully integrated, maybe they could make a push. But that's another team where they have the wins right now. They just don't feel to me like a top 15 team, but rankings are relative. And then in terms of Villanova, they have the great neutral court win over Florida State. They've survived some of their Big 5 tests where they've been tested more than usual, being the clear hunted member of the Big Five. But I think you have to rank both those teams in the second tier right now, even though watching them maybe not inspire, maybe won't inspire the same level of confidence.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like if you keep winning, at some point you have to be credited for it. Just like if you keep losing, you have to eventually be discredited for it. Like Purdue keeps losing to good teams, at some point you got to win them. Texas Tech keeps winning, even if we don't think they're that good. They keep winning. Like at some point we have to credit them. So I think that'll be something to watch as Big 12 play gets underway. I found that pretty much there's been 15 or 16 teams that have been clearly in the top 25 each week the last couple of weeks doing their rankings. And after that, it's like I have no idea who I should be ranking. That's kind of where we are at this point. I mean, there's teams like Buffalo who won all their games, but their only real win is West Virginia. And how good a win really is that? They have those two big tests coming with Marquette and Syracuse that will tell us a lot. Houston's undefeated. They're going on D. Do they have enough firepower on offense? Iowa's whole resume is based on 2K Classic wins that aren't very good. St. John's is undefeated. Furman's undefeated. Kentucky has 2 losses now, lost to Seton Hall. The eye test doesn't really say they're a top 25 team. I think I'll probably keep them in. Kansas State has lost their two games that they were really tested in. Got to win some eventually. Iowa State got handled by Iowa after I expected Iowa State to handle Iowa. Like, you just get to this group and you're like, who do I rank here? I mean, Louisville probably should be in the mix at least. Indiana should be in the mix. Ohio State's been solid. Like, you just run out of teams, man. Nebraska. You're so uninspired by so many of these teams that you just kind of have to force them into somewhere or another.
Yeah, I think now the tier system has fallen apart at this point. There is no clear tier 3. But I do think that the 3 teams that you have to rank are Indiana, Mississippi State, and Nebraska. I think Nebraska's probably looked the best out of those 3. Indiana has come through with kind of the most solid wins, kind of sneaking by. Louisville, they do have that loss against Arkansas, but Arkansas is better than people expected. And then Mississippi State, their only losses to Arizona State, which is fine. They really haven't lived up to expectations quite yet, but as they get more opportunities, maybe we'll see them kind of separate themselves into like a 3rd tier. But then, I mean, after that, you can literally go in almost any other direction except in the direction of Furman. I think that's just ridiculous. But
yeah, we agree that Furman should not be ranked. Yesterday, they were like losing briefly to South Carolina Upstate, and I like started to question whether that would be like the worst loss for a ranked team ever, losing to a USC Upstate team that went like. They won like 4 games last year. Like they were really, 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 really bad, and then lost all their best players from that team. So yeah, I mean, they're not a top 25 team, but they like their whole resume is like we beat Villanova and we beat Loyola Chicago, which is now not a resume because Loyola Chicago stinks, and we haven't lost yet. But they played like 2D2s, Elon, USC Upstate, Western Carolina. Like they won a bye game. That's all they did. Let's stop giving him credit for it.
Yeah, because resume is great and all, but at this point in the season, you still have to consider the preseason rankings. I know when the last time I checked KenPom, Furman was still in the 120s. I think it's okay if you rank Buffalo and Houston, because I had both those teams getting at-large bids in the preseason, where I had Houston in the low 40s and Buffalo winning the MAC, but if they didn't, they would be in the first 4. So I think that's perfectly reasonable to rank both those teams. Where Furman, I don't even know if they're the best team. I mean, they're probably the best team in their conference. Because I was going to reference Georgia State, but they're in the Sun Belt, so that's a different conference.
UNCG, maybe.
Oh yeah, they're pretty good.
I mean, even Wofford is solid, and
East Tennessee State. A lot of roster turnover, but they're historically have been great at kind of turning things around very quickly.
Yeah, I think Furman's probably the best team in the SoCon, or at least has to be respected like that because of their wins. But they're super overrated. They should not be ranked. I don't want to spend any more time on this podcast on Furman. And look, you all know I love mid-majors. If you listen to this podcast, you know I love mid-majors. That doesn't make Furman a top 25 team just because they're not losing. Like that's just not a real argument. I think a team that you could make like a sneaky. I think Iowa should be ranked at this point because of the Iowa State win. I thought that was really impressive. They're still kind of figuring it out, playing slower, but that's a real win. And they didn't look bad against Wisconsin at home, and then losing to Michigan State is not a criminal offense. I think they should be in the top 25. Houston should be in the top 25. It's kind of trying to round it out here. Yeah, I think Ohio State should be ranked.
Marquette.
Yeah, Marquette probably deserves it at this point. Yeah, I would say so. St. John's is undefeated. I'd rank them
because Marquette's only losses are to Kansas on neutral, which was a very close game, and then at Indiana. And I mean, I have both those teams ahead of Marquette, obviously.
Very forgivable. Yeah, very forgivable.
St. John's is, for me, the team. For number 25, I was thinking between St. John's, Iowa, Houston, keeping Purdue in, keeping Kentucky in, or throwing LSU back into the mix, just because of where I had them in the preseason and their losses weren't too egregious. I think that they're still probably going to get in the top 25 by the end of the season. But I went with St. John's. I think that they, outside of Kentucky, they have the most talent out of that group. They haven't had it come together yet, but I think the VCU win is certainly gaining some momentum. The Rutgers win was until they lost to Fordham. And then in terms of Buffalo, I'm putting Buffalo in. I've seen them play multiple times. They're very good. That West Virginia win is a paper tiger win. That's not going to mean much coming soon. Could still be quadrant one due to the strength of the Big 12, but they're good enough to be ranked.
Yeah, it should be a quadrant one. I mean, it's top 75. West Virginia is a top 75 team. I don't think there's too much doubt on that. But yeah, I think St. John's. I forget who I sent this to, but I was like, St. John's looks like a top 10 team for 10 minutes a game, and the rest of the game they look like an NIT team. But those 10 minutes are so damn good that you start to be like, okay, this team could be something, and we got to see it come together. They had 3 guys not start today because of, Chris Mullen didn't say it was disciplinary reasons, but
they were late.
Yeah, something stupid. It's basically some sort of discipline, showing up late to the game. I mean, they're just not a team I trust yet. I think I'd rank them because they haven't lost, but I don't trust them.
Yeah, and I think people don't really realize about St. John's is like Shamorie Ponds is much better than I think most people think. I think he's clearly the best player in the Big East. I think people kind of saw him as just like this exciting scorer on this underperforming St. John's team, but I think he's clearly the best player in the conference and maybe even a top 10 player nationally. I think he's as good, if not better, than Carson Edwards.
Yeah, I think he's better than Carson Edwards, to be honest.
I think so too. I was just hedging because I'm a wimp.
Stop hedging, Brad. If you have takes, give them out. This is what the pod is for.
No, I mean you don't have to tell me to give out takes. I've given out enough takes that are going to look very bad. Some will look okay, but like the Ryder 27 wins one. I mean, that's not happening.
Yeah, the MAC sucks. The MAC is real bad. Like the fact that Ryder, who is by far the MAC's best team, got handled at Hofstra, who might be the CAA's best team, not good. The fact that Iona lost to Columbia today and is now 2-6, Iona's bad. They're not good. Canisius had the best player in the conference last year in Isaiah Reese. Now he stinks. He's shooting 35% from the field and averaging 11 points a game. Like, the whole Monmouth is an absolute train wreck. I mean, I think Marist and Siena are going to sneak into the top 5 just because they have solid coaching and they play hard. And they have like one good player each. Jalen Pickett at Siena. Siena might have 2 good players once Elijah Burns, if he's eligible. And Brian Parker for Marist. They're going to have like one good player and they're going to like play hard and be disciplined. And that's going to be enough to make them a top 5 team because the league is so bad. There's my MAC rant for the day. Extra read all of that.
Okay, two teams. I'm guessing this is before we move into the weekly pick section. But there are 2 teams that I'm not buying quite yet, but it seems like a lot of people are both feet on the bandwagon. That's Oklahoma and Maryland. So my question to you is, where do you see these teams right now?
I think Oklahoma is a tournament team right now. I mean, from what I've seen, we'll see what happens when they play Big 12 teams. But I mean, I'm just very impressed by them on defense. They're third in the RPI right now. The RPI is now defunct, but they're third in the RPI formula if you want to do it. I think they're so much better on defense. They've got guys who can switch. I mean, Jimani McNeese is a real impact player on that end of the floor. And Christian James can really fill it up. I mean, is he going to continue to shoot 43% from the field or from three and 52% from the field? Maybe not. But I mean, he's really good. They're getting just enough from the Aaron Calixte, Miles Reynolds backcourt pairing that they're getting enough scoring overall. They're somewhat deep. They're playing like what? They're playing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're playing like 9 guys. I think they're a tournament team. I really do. I think they could be a sneaky quadrant 1 chance for Northwestern in 2 weeks when they come to Welsh Ryan. Top 35 might be pushing it, but we'll see.
And then where do you see Maryland too?
Ooh, that's tough. I don't know. I mean, I think they're probably a tournament team right now. Cowan's really good still. I mean, those bigs are very physically imposing between Fernando and Jalen Smith. They're shooting the ball a little bit better than I expected they would. Like they're not a horrible shooting team. Aaron Wiggins is shooting 40% from 3, which is pretty big. Like we talked about it this offseason, and that was one of your big reasons was like you don't think Aaron Wiggins is going to shoot it, and he's shooting it. They're getting stuff from like Cyril Smith and Eric Ayala are both like good role players in the conference. Eric Ayala is also shooting 40% from 3. I mean, they're not super deep, but they're athletic and they got dudes who could score it. And the Big Ten's good. Will they win big? I think the thing is there's going to be so many Big Ten games that are so close. Like that Michigan Northwestern game, so close. So many little things that can change the game. And I think when you have a coach who's, I don't think, very good, you're going to be hurt by that, or especially in-game coaches. Like I think a Matt Painter is going to find ways to win games. I think, obviously, a John Beilein, a Tom Izzo. But, like, some of the weaker in-game coaches in the conference, Fran McCaffrey, Mark Turgeon, I'll throw Chris Collins into that mix. For some of these bubble teams, I think it's really going to matter. I don't know that I trust Turge.
Yeah, so where I see these teams, in terms of Oklahoma, I still don't think that they're an NCAA tournament team. I think TCU, now that they're healthy, is certainly better than them. And I think West Virginia could figure it out. I think that's I don't think that the Big 12 is going to get 8 teams in. So I think that 7th spot between Oklahoma and West Virginia, I still have some belief in Texas and just their kind of talent and athleticism. But that 7th and 8th between West Virginia and Oklahoma, I think will be the deciding factor. I mean, Oklahoma's getting a lot of credit for their resume, but a lot of the teams that they beat, we don't really know if they're good. Like Florida, I don't know what to think of Florida right now. I think that if I had to predict where they would finish, I think like 9 or 10 seed. Dayton, I have no idea where to put these top of the A10 teams in regards to the national picture. I guess 10, 11 seed. Notre Dame, I don't think it's a tournament team. Wichita State, certainly not a tournament team. Then the one surefire tournament team that they played is Wisconsin. They lost by 20 points. And in terms of Maryland, I think Maryland's going to be saved by the strength of the Big Ten, where the Big 12 is down and those middle games aren't going to be as strong as they were last year or in years past. The Big Ten, I think, is just going to elevate everybody so much that teams are going to luck into, maybe even 7 wins, or it's a 20-game schedule. It's not 7 wins, but maybe going 8-12 or 9-11 could be good enough to get a tournament bid.
Yeah, I think 9 is probably the magic number. I think there's going to be a ton of teams between 11-9 and 9-11 in this conference, and you got to find a way to get those wins. It's going to matter. It's not going to matter. It's going to matter more like who you beat than just wins. Like if you have 9 wins, but you beat Rutgers, Penn State, Illinois twice, and then you beat Minnesota, Nebraska, and Indiana once, that's not a tournament team to me. That's you beat the shitty teams thing.
That's the thing. Like there's only 2 shitty teams really, and it's Rutgers and Illinois.
Right.
So to get 9 wins, you're going to get wins over if not tournament teams, then teams that are close enough.
Right, like a road Penn State wins probably quadrant 1, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy that the 12th best team in the conference is going to be a quadrant 1. Northwestern's going to be a clear quadrant 1. They're 8 to 12, hopefully 8. That's a quadrant 1. You're just going to build resumes.
The fact that the league moved to 20 league games, plus you get at least one Big Ten tournament game.
Yeah,
you have 21 opportunities where probably at most 4, maybe at most 4 of the 21 games are going to be against bad teams, maybe 5 teams that would be considered like a minefield of sorts.
Right.
That's 75% of your league is going to help you. Might not be a quadrant 1 or quadrant 2 win, or it'll probably be a quadrant 2, but might not be a resume mover per se, but it'll definitely help you incrementally.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how the resumes look for the Big Ten, because there's going to be a lot of teams that have pretty comparable, pretty good resumes on paper compared to the rest of the conferences, because there's going to be so many quadrant 1 and 2 games.
So it's going to be a 10-bid league, maybe even 11-bid league.
I'll bet 10. Pick 'em.
Yeah. Move to the pick 'em segment. Yeah, but I wouldn't take a bet where I'm saying 11 Big Ten teams are going to make it.
Oh yeah, no, that'd be really fun. All right.
So we'll go back and forth again. We'll each pick. You want to each pick 4, and then we'll give our bye game.
Yeah, it works for me.
You want to start off?
All right. Here's a game I'm pretty interested in this week, just because the games are so bad. San Diego at Oregon. Oregon's been pretty blah, as we've kind of said all season. They're just not very interesting. But San Diego has been very solid. If they could win another Pac-12 game, I think they already beat Colorado, if that's correct.
Yes.
The WCC's got some chances where if you maybe beat BYU and St. Mary's on the road, those might be sneaky quadrant 1s. You'll get 2 cracks at Gonzaga. Even San Francisco might be a road quadrant 1. I mean, I don't think they're an at-large team, but they're good. I think San Diego wins that game.
I'm going to go Oregon. I think it will be a very close game. Luke King is back. Only will be a second game back, though. But I think Oregon, they're another team where their talent level isn't going to match their resume. Where right now, I would say that they missed the NCAA tournament. Even with the win over Syracuse is going to age well because Frank Howard wasn't playing in that game. Yeah, they beat Syracuse, but I'll go with Oregon here. Certainly won't be enough to move them anywhere closer to the NCAA tournament picture, but San Diego is a good team, as you mentioned, veteran team, and I think this will be a step in the right direction for Oregon.
And a game for you to pick.
Game for me to pick. I will go with, I think, an interesting litmus test game, Davidson and Temple, where, kind of mentioned, where does Davidson stack in the national picture, being one of the top A10 teams. They don't really have a great resume win right now. I think that they will lose to Temple here and kind of add more murkiness to their resume.
Still on the Temple bandwagon, I see. I think I'll pick Davidson here. Kellen Grady's going to be really good. John Axel Goodmanson. That game I have pretty much no feel for, but I'm going to gut feel it with Davidson.
Yeah, there's not really much to say. We have two great backcourts with Alston and Rose versus Grady and Goodmanson, but should be a very interesting litmus test game for both teams.
Yes, sir. How about the big headliner, UNC and Gonzaga in Chapel Hill? I think that game you just have to pick because it's so important. This is tough. I think I'm going to pick North Carolina at home. Gonzaga coming off the loss makes it a little bit more complicated. I was more confident in this pick before Gonzaga lost, but with their depth being a concern, I think North Carolina wins this ball game.
I'm also going with UNC. I just love the kind of pieces with this team. They're still working their way out. Kind of feeling their way out. I think Naz Little is a ticking time bomb in terms of when he kind of explodes and realizes his potential. He's been very wild thus far, taking too many jump shots. But I think playing him more at the 4, maybe this could be a good way. Have him guard Hachimura, kind of match athleticism there. I think UNC, being at home, is kind of the deciding factor for me. But I think that they, kind of take a step toward their potential here and get the win.
Game number 4. One thing real quick, just on that, I don't have the academic calendar up for North Carolina, but I do always think it's important to note students do play a pretty big role in the atmospheres at a lot of games. North Carolina has a great fan base, not just students, but that does matter for home court. I think it's not a super tangible thing, but if the students are off campus, which I would assume they are for North Carolina by then, because I know we're off campus. I know my brothers at his school, my friends at their schools are off campus by then. That matters a little bit, I think, for a weekend game. Guys are gone. Crowd might be a little sleepier than it would have been otherwise.
All right, I'm going to pick I'll go Villanova over Kansas in an upset. Kansas has not been playing well. Villanova looks to have gotten another piece kind of integrated with Jermaine Samuels, who's played very well of late. I think between him and the veterans of Pascal and Booth, and then Kansas not having as a Buki, I think I'll go with Villanova in the upset here.
Yeah, this one went from like game of the year preseason to a little less luster, but I think I'm going to pick Kansas. I'm just not quite there yet on Villanova. They've struggled with their Big 5 games. I know LaSalle pushed him. St. Joe's pushed him a little bit.
Temple pushed him
as well. Yeah. I mean, I think Kansas at home is a little too much, even though I'm not quite sold on them either.
Villanova has to play at Penn this week too. I mean, that could easily be a loss if they don't step up their game there.
All right. My pick of a game. That's interesting. How about we do that LSU Houston game? LSU, we want to see what they have. They're going to go on the road into a raucous environment. I think they're already sold out at Houston, playing in their new arena. Houston's been so good on defense. I think their discipline will be a real test for our young LSU team. I think Houston at home finds a way in this ballgame.
I'm going to go with LSU. I mean, I think that they're probably still a top 25 team. That was a bad loss to Oklahoma State. That loss is not aging well, and I don't think it will age well going forward. But I think, clearly on paper, talent-wise, this is a top 25 team. They haven't, lost too egregiously to the point where they have to be removed like a Kansas State or a Purdue or a Kentucky. But I think that they kind of get on track here and pick up a win. I think Dejan Giroux should be back for this game too for Houston, which would be something to watch.
Yeah, that would be big. He's pretty important because he's another creator who can play on or off the ball. Pretty valuable player.
My pick here, number 6. I'll go with. I guess I will go Mississippi State over Cincinnati. Kind of another litmus test. Mississippi State beat a shorthanded Clemson team without Marcus Reed or Marquise Reed over the weekend. They still need to build their resume, kind of prove that they're a top 25 team. I think Cincy's a little better than people thought since moving Cam Rudin to the bench, starting Keith Williams on the wing. It was like a tough wing with more size. I think Mississippi State gets a solid win here at home.
Yeah, I would agree. Cincinnati's been better. Liked how they looked against Xavier. Watched a little bit of that game when I could. But, yeah, to me, Mississippi State at home, very talented group, finds a way here.
You're up to number 7.
Oh, yeah. That's how about Virginia Tech and Washington on Saturday at Atlantic City. That's the one. New Jersey. Brains fried, guys. Sorry about that. But yeah, Virginia Tech and Washington, really kind of interesting litmus test type game for them. For both of those teams, I think Washington really needs it just because of Pac-12 opportunity. But I think with the cross-country trip for a one-off, that's really tough. Virginia Tech wins this ballgame.
I'm going to go with Virginia Tech as well. I kind of mentioned this earlier with Washington. I think that their talent is certainly worthy of a tournament bid. I mean, this is a super important game, almost essential game for their resume, kind of separate themselves in the Pac-12, which has been, a absolute disaster in terms of non-conference performance this far outside of Arizona State. I'll go with Virginia Tech here as well, even without Chris Clark. They've seemed to have adjusted pretty well without him to this point. I think that they'll grab the win here. Last but not least, Butler versus Indiana. I'm going to go Indiana. I think that they're just the better team. Neutral court. Butler's probably a tournament team at this point. Very much on the cut line. I think Indiana has kind of separated itself, that they're kind of approaching that second tier of teams that we talked at length earlier.
Yeah, Butler's been a team that hasn't really been impressive to me. It's like they've won every game they're pretty much supposed to win, and they've lost pretty much every game that they shouldn't have won. Like, they should beat Ole Miss at home, and they probably should beat Florida on a neutral. That's a pretty 50-50 game. And otherwise, like, they lost that to Dayton on a neutral. So they basically had two 50-50 neutral games with Florida and Dayton. They won one, they lost the other. They lost at St. Louis. I would have liked to see them win that game. They didn't. I think Indiana wins this ball game. Butler, very, very, very mediocre club for me. We'll see how they develop as the season goes on.
And in terms of bye game, I'm going with Radford over Clemson. Clemson has not impressed. They're giving everybody nice wins. They've given Creighton, Nebraska, Mississippi State. I mean, just off the top of my head, nice wins. So that's going to age poorly. I think Radford gets them here. Another upset for Radford.
Yeah, I mean, I was considering the low-hanging fruit that is DePaul versus UIC, but that's not great, right? Like, we shouldn't be picking bye game upsets of DePaul. I mean, that's not fair. How about Grand Canyon beats Texas at Texas? Grand Canyon looked good against Nevada. They pushed Seton Hall. They finally get over the hump. Find a way to pull out a bye game win.
I was so mad when Texas lost to VCU because I needed that game to kind of bounce Providence back into relevance. But Texas, another team, is Texas going to give everybody quality wins at this point? But
they're going to be one of the because they're going to stay top 75, so they're going to be a quadrant one for like everybody who beats them, even though they're not going to be that great. It's going to be really fun.
Just going over the picks from last week, you had Oklahoma. We both had Providence. Both had Michigan. We both had West Virginia, who lost to Florida.
Yikes. Rough week.
Minnesota beat Nebraska, right?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, that was – I think Nebraska blew that game late. Both had Purdue and Gonzaga, who both won. We both had Iowa State, who got destroyed against Iowa. Both had Nevada and Xavier. Xavier got demolished in their rivalry game. Nevada pulled out a late one. Then we both had Indiana, who squeaked out against Louisville. I had Marquette. You had Wisconsin. And then for bye games, I got another one. Got Georgia State over Alabama. And Syracuse pulled away from –
You kill him.
I know. I'm what, 4 for 5?
Yeah, something like that. Unbelievable. I think that wraps us up for today. Appreciate you all listening. Really fun episode. Had a lot of fun recording this one. As always, like us, subscribe, rate, whatever you can do to help us get the show out to as many people as possible. We'll have more coverage of college basketball, as always, on our Twitter pages, on our sites where we can contribute, and, of course, on the podcast. Thanks for listening, and have a great night.